it is beautiful to him because the diversity of the cast and the accomplishment of the death work matters most, not the message. All right. Unless you've been living under a rock, you may have seen a controversy swell up concerning the Olympics over the weekend. The opening ceremony is always an interesting spectacle, received criticisms for perceived anti-Christian imagery. The picture on the bumper we had there shows it. It was supposedly a picture of the Last Supper and using people in drag and all sorts of costumes that were inappropriate, or at least pointing to inappropriate activities, or at least as far as Christians are concerned. Other people might not think they're inappropriate, but we do. Now, I can't show you the song or the video because our YouTube video will get taken down if I do. They've made that plenty clear. People have been trying to show it multiple places, and it keeps getting flagged and taken down. But I am going to talk about it. And there's been some confusion about the opening performance that I would like to clear up. And then I want to talk about the Christian reaction to it because it has been, a little bit weird on both sides. So obviously, the depiction of the Last Supper in a painting by Leonardo da Vinci, we've all seen this painting. And we've all seen the painting. And here it is. Here's the picture, or at least in general. I'll put that in the overlay. So this is what got everyone's ire up. People think that it looks like the Last Supper photo. And for reference, you can reference the Last Supper photo. I don't actually have an overlay to pull up. I should have done that, but I don't. So here's the thing. There have been various parodies of the painting over history, and no one is disputing that. I haven't seen a Christian say, "Oh yeah, the Simpsons did it," or people are saying, "Why do you get so upset when they do it at the Olympics with drag queens, but they don't, but not when the Simpsons do it, or when the Godfather does it, or when some sitcom does it?" So I want to be very clear. No one's disputing that there are parodies of the painting. However, mockery is different than parody. There is a subtle difference. And so people were taking this as mockery, not just as parody, as a shoving in the face of Christians, saying you are not welcome here. When the Simpsons does it, when the Sopranos or the Godfather, whatever it was, did it, it was kind of like, okay, I get what you're saying. It's like it's just this iconic photo. But when you do it and your message is clearly antithetical to classic Christian morality, and that's what you're using it to promote, it's mockery. It's not just parody. So that's the subtle difference. So the question, though, is, was it the Last Supper? There's a lot of things going on that are saying that it wasn't, that Christians were so focused on themselves and being offended that they missed the energy of it being the Feast of Dionysus or the Bacchanalia of Bacchus, who was just the Roman version of Dionysus. And for those uninitiated into Roman and Greek mythology, it's the same god. Dionysus, or Dionysus, however you want to say it, is the god of pleasure, drunkenness, freedom, and intoxication. Bacchus is the same god. This quote comes from an article that we'll release in the description here. It says this: the Olympic opening parody was a provocation that could be interpreted as both the Last Supper and a Bacchanalia, acknowledging the Olympics' ancient Greek origins. Philippe Catherine, I don't know if that's if I said it right. Sorry, Philippe or Felipe, however you're supposed to say your name. The actor who represented Dionysus said the ceremony was very crazy, free, fresh. On the controversy it aroused, he said, if there weren't any, it wouldn't be fun. So the question a lot of people have been asking is, was it the Last Supper or was it Bacchanalia? And I'm going to agree with this article. I think it was both. And I really do. I think now it's not an inspiration, because the guy who wrote the script says, I wasn't inspired by the Last Supper. No, but you did use its imagery, and that's something different. You were inspired by something completely different. So first I want to say that getting infuriated over pagans doing pagan things is kind of silly. The Olympics kind of started from paganism. This I mean, it's the celebration of the Greek gods, the god on Olympus, and trying to please them with running and with doing various acrobats, and they used to supposedly they used to actually participate in the nude and things of that nature. So being infuriated over pagans doing pagan things or talking about pagan stuff, I do think it's silly. However, on the other side of the coin, being offended that our God, Jesus Christ, is being brought in league with a false God that focuses on pleasure and debauchery is not only okay, but necessary. We ought to be offended when the holy is in league with the profane. It ought to be offensive. That doesn't mean we need to be infuriated or rage. But it is offensive. It ought to be offensive. If you weren't offended by it, then you don't quite understand the mockery of what's going on. Let's explain it a little bit. Now, remember, Jesus said, "Don't be surprised if the world hates you because it hated me first." So this is the display of the hatred of God. And I'm speaking of more than the mere imagery. I'm talking about the entire message behind the act. And it's not just this act. And this act is spurring the conversation. It's spurring what I'm talking about. But it's all over the world when we talk about entertainment and things of that nature. There's a hatred of God when we embrace the profane as something good and holy and something to be pursued. So in case you thought the last scene had nothing to do with the Last Supper, here are a few things to consider. I'm going to bring up a few pictures. Well, first of all, here is the Philippe portraying Dionysus or Bacchus, and you can see in the back it's supposed to be the feast of the gods. You've got a transgender and drag queens and a child in it. And can we just say, for reference, perhaps maybe even if we're going to do that, maybe not having children involved. Okay, but was the Last Supper intended to be something that's been drawn from that? Maybe it's not an inspiration. Was it supposed to be drawn from that? Well, here's overlay 1 that I want to share with you. And this is what it says. It says, the idea is to bring a new perspective. We're not making anything ridiculous, defends Peach, a drag queen revealed by the show Drag Race, who took part in the sequence. No one was dressed as Jesus. No one parodied him, neither in attire nor in behavior. The idea is to bring a new perspective. In the past, there have been many representations of the table of the apostles, and this has never shocked anyone. As luck would have it, when it's LGBT and drag, it's disturbing, but we're used to it. People are obsessed with gender issues that bother conservatives. Okay, so hey, how dare you for noticing that this seems inappropriate? There have been a lot of people that have done things about the Last Supper and about the table of the apostles before, and how dare you notice that this is the same thing? Well, it's not the same thing as a parody of The Simpsons. A mockery is not the same thing as a parody. And when they say, "Oh, well, no one was depicting Jesus per se," we're just bringing a new perspective. What it means by the new perspective is they don't need Jesus for that, because Bacchus, the guy who's playing Dionysus, is actually going to sing a song saying we don't need Jesus. The table is open to everyone, not just those who believe in Jesus Christ. The table is open to everyone. A lot of people are like, hey, Jesus ate and dined with sinners. And that's true. And he ate with Judas at the table. Yes, but he also confronted Judas at the table. That's something that's important. He confronted Peter at the table when Peter was not behaving appropriately. He called them to something greater. So this is not about sitting and eating with sinners. It's about the offense of saying what Jesus is doing at the Last Supper table is to call his disciples into following him even unto death, and to recognize that he is going to be in betrayal, and he's going to love the one that betrayed him by telling them the truth, that I know what you did, and you can repent, but you're not going to, and I'm going to call you out on it. He does that with Judas. So even if no one's dressed as Jesus, the idea is we don't need to clothe our shame anymore. We'll get into that in a little bit. We don't need to clothe our shame anymore. We just need to embrace all of the diversity and the differences that are about us. It remakes the image. You don't need Jesus because everyone is Jesus in this sense. And so maybe you're going, yeah, but you're still taking, like, they're just saying, hey, if it looks like that, it looks like that. No one's actually saying that they were doing it. They're doing it. Well, here is a screenshot of a since deleted picture of the lady, the large lady that was doing the heart um, in the middle as it zoomed out from her. This is from her Instagram, I believe. And if you can look at it, she takes the picture and she says, "Oh yeah, the new gay testament." You can see it right there, and you can see that she's embracing it. She's embracing the connection. She wasn't distancing herself from it. She was embracing the connection. In line with that, the French media seems to be fine with it. You see this as they talk about the scene on scene. Now, some people are saying, "Oh, it's just setting the scene. It's just setting the scene." But from what I understand, one of the things that they said was the name of the performance was actually the scene of the Last Supper on the Seine, or that's the river. Maybe that's the case. Maybe it's not. I don't speak French, so you can let me know if that's actually not the case. But all of those seem to indicate that, yes, they did know that that's what the imagery was. Now, it may not have been like, "Oh, let's do this to really own the conservatives," but it was definitely maybe not inspired, but it was part of the imagery they were looking for. It was part of the imagery they were looking for. Now, they do come out and apologize for this, but in their apology, the organizers, they never say anything about the painting, about it not, deny. They don't really deny it outright. They just kind of say, "Hey, we were trying to unify everybody, but if it was offensive, we're sorry." So here we go. In the apology, they said it was not inspired by the painting. I believe they're telling the truth. The whole point wasn't the painting. That wasn't the only part of the act. But they were inspired by something else and used the imagery of the Last Supper to share that inspiration. That's why it's mockery. Okay, that's why it's mockery. They're going to take what they believe to be the truth and use the imagery of the Last Supper painting to exhibit that. So let's take a look at what they said. This is in The Guardian. "Clearly, there was never an intention to show disrespect to any religious group." That's in regards to the opening ceremony. "The open ceremony tried to celebrate community tolerance," the Paris 2024 spokesperson Anne de Camp told at a press conference. "We believe the ambition was achieved. If people have taken any offense, we are really sorry." Well, here's the thing. I actually believe her. I believe that they did not realize that this would offend people because they have bought into a new cultural narrative that Christianity is affirmation centric. And anyone who disagrees with this inclusion is the problem. That's why she maintains, "We believe this ambition was achieved." She thinks that tolerance was achieved and the people who are offended are the problem. And she's going to apologize for the offense. But generally speaking, she thinks that the desire to achieve unity and tolerance was accomplished. But now, France has a long history of devaluing religious thought and Christian values, so it's not really a shock to me. However, how is this unity of love and of inclusiveness achieved if people were offended by it? Millions of people took offense. How was this achieved? Well, it's because the ones that took offense are not the target audience. They are the ones that do not understand. They are the ones that need to be educated. The ones that believe a child being included in such a display is inappropriate, that a woman or a man dressed as a woman with a beard was not appropriate. This is because the opening ceremonies were not about mocking God. They were about becoming God. They were, in essence, a refutation of Genesis chapter 3, whether the organizers realize it or not. The clear amalgamation of Bacchanalia with the Last Supper was intended to unite humans driven by their passions and lusts, not Christians. One might ask now, what does Bacchanalia have to do with the Olympics or with France? And there have been many things written about that. Apparently, there's the god of the River Seine that was supposed to be centerpiece in this table. So the Olympic opening parody was a provocation that could be interpreted. This is out of Tablet in the UK. Sorry, this quote. "The Olympic opening parody was a provocation that could be interpreted as both the Last Supper and Bacchanalia, acknowledging the Olympics' ancient Greek origins." And we already read that quote. There weren't, he says, if there weren't any, it wouldn't be fun. If Philippe says, if there wasn't any controversy, it wouldn't be fun. So what does it have to do? Not much. But it does have something to do with placing pleasure and self-actualization as the highest moral virtue, which, when combined with a depiction of the Last Supper, not only parodies the painting, but mocks the very values of self-sacrifice that Christ displayed during the Last Supper. Now, ironically, we are now told that mocking Jesus is okay and we should be embraced, but mocking paganism is unchristian. Well, Elijah would like a word, so would the prophets of Baal. Now, the heart of Bacchanalia was irrational pursuit of self-pleasure, and people are invoking Bacchanalia or the Feast of Dionysus to this. So I'm not the one saying Bacchanalia is a part of it. It has been talked about in multiple places online and by some people in the Olympics itself. So let's dive in to what Bacchanalia actually was. It was this pursuit of self-pleasure, and for people in the cult of Bacchus, it was mandatory. In fact, so much so that those within the cult that refrained from such activities were literally sacrificed. Here's a quote from, I believe, about the 4th century or 3rd century. The notes will be in the description. At first, these the cult of Bacchus, they were confined to women. No male was admitted, and they had 3 stated days in the year in which persons were initiated during the daytime, and matrons were chosen to act as priestesses. Pacula Ania, a Campanian, when she was priestess, made a complete change, as though by divine monition, for she was the first to admit men, and she initiated her own sons, Menneus Cyrenius and Herenius Cyrenius. At the same time, she made the rite a nocturnal one, and instead of 3 days in the year, celebrated it 5 times a month. When once the mysteries had assumed this promiscuous character, and men were mingled with women with all the license of nocturnal orgies, there was no crime, no deed of shame wanting. More uncleanness was wrought by men with men than with women. Whoever would not submit to defilement or shrank from violating others was sacrificed as a victim. To regard nothing as impious or criminal was the very sum of their religion. The men, as though seized with madness and with frenzied distortions of their bodies, shrieked out prophecies. The matrons, dressed as Bacchae, their hair disheveled, rushed down to the Tiber with burning torches, plunging them into the water, and drew them out again, the flame undiminished, as they were made of sulfur mixed with lime. Men were fastened to a machine and hurried off to hidden caves, and they were said to have been wrapped away by the gods. That's not the word there. These were the men who refused to join their conspiracy or take part in their crimes or submit to pollution. They formed an immense multitude, almost equal to the population of Rome. Amongst them were members of noble families, both men and women. It had been made a rule for the last 2 years that no one more than a 20-year-old should be initiated. They captured those to be deceived and polluted. And this article goes on to say, despite being outlawed by the Roman Senate in 186 BC, so this is in the 2nd century, I misspoke, sorry about that, the Bacchanalia festival was simply too popular to be outlawed forever, and it was brought back. The drunken hedonistic celebrations of the Bacchanalia were carried out with full fervency during the imperial period, and as noted by the authors such authors as Virgil, Livy, and Juvenal. It would not be until the moralizing of the Christian era that Bacchanalia and other pagan rituals were again outlawed and eventually faded into history. So why implement Bacchus or Bacchanalia in the Olympic ceremonies? Because unity is not really the goal. Becoming our own God is. And that's what Bacchanalia was all about, the pursuit of relentless pleasure, becoming my own God, and really serving myself and taking part in all of the things that are called to be shameful. We now call them not shameful. And if there was not much more on the nose, we can take a look at Philippe Catarine's song. You know, that's the blue man representing Bacchus or Dionysus. This man here, that's the guy. So these are the words translated from the song that he sang, and I'm going to quote these. These are translated from French into English. Naked. Would there be wars if we had stayed naked? No. Where to hide a revolver when you are naked? Where? I know what you're thinking, but it's not a good idea. Yeah. More rich people, more poor people when we go back to being naked. Yes. Whether we're slim or fat, we're simply naked. Yes. Let's live as we are born, naked. Let's live as we were born. like animals are, who never overdo it. They see that we look too much like monkeys under coats. Pelicans with lousy hats, simply lousy. Let's stay naked, simply naked. There wouldn't have been wars if we had stayed naked. No. Are we all sisters and brothers when we're naked? Now, what is this? What does it mean to stay naked? Well, you might recall in Genesis chapter 3, nakedness is the cover of shame and sin. God is the one that fashions clothing for, it's the first sacrifice, the fashion of skins for Adam and Eve. So this is a call to undo the curse without Jesus. This is a call to undo the curse that made us aware of our shame and nakedness, not by repenting of sin and pursuing righteousness through Jesus Christ, but denying that sin exists and pursuing pleasure. That's what we mean by unity. We should all just be naked. After all, if we were all naked, we would be too busy with each other in our most vulnerable state to incite violence and wars. But if you recall what I read with the Feast of Bacchus and Bacchanalia, shows us that this is impossible, that the pursuit of hedonism and debauchery ends in pain and suffering, because when people call out shame, other people will try to silence them because they don't want to be reminded that shame does exist. So what's more, the offense on the eyes of this display was something as well. It was a culmination of postmodern desires, radical individualism, and deathworks. Carl Trueman writes about deathworks in his book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. And this is an article that he posted in 2021. And I think this quote really encapsulates this initial opening ceremony. Deathwork is a term used by sociologist Philip Reif. It refers to the act of using the sacred symbols of a previous era in order to subvert and then destroy their original significance and purpose. Reif uses Andre Serrano's notorious 1987 picture, Piss Christ, to illustrate this. The work is a photograph of something considered sacred, in this case, a crucifix, submerged in the artist's own urine. As Reif puts it, in Serrano's photo, the sacramental has been made excremental, or to borrow a phrase from Marx, that which is holy has been profaned. I think this was a death work. This is precisely what the opening of the ceremony sought to accomplish. The unity of the current culture at the expense of the culture from which it sprang. To overcome the West by guiding it into an entirely new definition of what it means to be a part of the West. This tolerance and inclusivity. It was a death work on a global scale. That's why it was so offensive. People can't put words to it because they're not entirely sure what they saw. And again, this is more than a parody. It's profanity. And it's intentionally so. The holy becomes profane, but then the profane is granted holiness in return. And this is why a progressive commented when I said, well, you'd talk about this. He commented beautiful under my most recent post concerning this issue. Now, does he really think it was beautiful? No, not really. The optics were gaudy. The imagery was unprofessional. The lyrics were bleh at best. The music was wanting. It really wasn't beautiful, but it is beautiful to him because the diversity of the cast and the accomplishment of the death work matters most, not the message. Celebrating our differences. This is great until our differences end up in those refusing to worship Bacchus-style hedonism and getting dismembered. I'm not saying that's what people are going to do, but that's what they did in Bacchanalia, and apparently that's what was being honored. Or it was the Last Supper. You choose. Either a pagan ceremony where hedonism and disgusting acts were taking place, even so disgusting that the Roman Empire pre-Christ were disgusted by it and tried to outlaw it. Or it was a mockery of the Last Supper in declaring our hedonistic desires as God rather than Jesus Christ. Really, those are the two options. I see neither of them as good, and neither of them is beautiful. And that, more than any other reason, is why this performance was and is offensive. Now, again, I'm not angry, heated, or even rageful. Frankly, pagans are going to pagan, like my friend Jonathan Pritchett says. But I can and should be offended that decency has been removed in favor of profanity. That sitting down to watch the opening ceremonies with your child is now going to resent in them seeing a death work. Not a waltz, as it was in the London Olympics, or 2008 Chinese drummers in the Beijing Olympics. Whatever you think of the Chinese government, that was a pretty interesting insight into their culture. This had nothing to do with French culture. They can tie it to a pagan god of the Seine River, but really had nothing to do with French culture and everything to do with moving on from the Western culture into an idealized version of progressive culture. And that is the unity that they were seeking. The purpose of the Last Supper was to give direction and admonition to Jesus' disciples before he is betrayed and goes to the cross for our sins. This has been flipped in this imagery on its head and made Jesus into a figure of unity within sin rather than above sin, to call sin good. What's it that they say? Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Now, one of the other offensive things is that in the country where the Louvre depicts masterpieces of artistic work that helped to build and found the West, that this artistic display threw all of that into the fire. This artistic opening Olympic ceremony was based and was not based on objective beauty. It was based on subjective feelings. And art is based on objective beauty. Now, there is some subjectivity in that, but postmodern art of the recent past and the death works on display here should make France ashamed. This was not art. It was cultural debasement. And it's okay to call it that. It's not even angry or offensive or I'm not even rageful. It is just what it is. In fact, as the pagan people of today continue to offer sacrifices to the gods of self-actualization and gender ideology, looking for fulfillment, perhaps as they continue to seek more and more extreme measures to fulfill themselves, we might employ Elijah's mockery to bring focus on how great our God is, and that no matter what death work they throw at him, they will never be able to dethrone him. So that's what's going on here. That's my take. Now, that is not to say we should mock people. That is not to say we should not love people. We should, but we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, the theme of this month's, and we've gone a little bit longer than normal, but hey, we've been gone for a little while, so why not a longer episode? The theme of this month has been, which way? Russell Brand's journey leads to true fulfillment and hope in the Holy Spirit. Different churches' version leads to Francis' opening ceremony. So what's the Christian to do in all of this? Now, I'm sure some people will be offended by the things that I said, and I'm sure some people will be angry and frustrated that I took such a harsh stance on the opening ceremonies. But I think it's clear that we must examine ourselves. What part of us is offended? Is it simply because we are used to being outraged and we want to be outraged by this because it looks like another liberal love fest? If that's the case, then I do think our hearts are in the wrong place. But is it because our God is being blasphemed and God will not be mocked? And we fear for the people involved in the mockery of God. And we mourn for those doing the blaspheming in the same way that Jesus wept over Jerusalem. Offense can lead to care, not outrage. Prayer that these same people that mock our Savior in the name of inclusion and diversity can have a similar work of the Holy Spirit as Russell Brand has is necessary. But mockery of worship to a pagan god that will only destroy them is also necessary, pointing out the absurdity that men can become women and women can become men, and pointing out the absurdity that drag is not just simply putting on women's face and dancing around degenerately, is not loving for anybody. We need to call those things out for what they are while still seeking to love people and guide them to Jesus Christ. God will not be mocked, and we should live faithfully. The thief is not the rigidity of our beliefs, but the one that would tear down truth, love, and godliness. Now, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. Refute him. Pray for those who persecute you. Love as Jesus loved. This will not reach everyone. Some people will be offended and run even further away from Jesus, but it will reach those as it is intended to reach. And honestly, that's all that we can ask for. God bless. Stay reasonable, and we'll see you next time.